Welcome to the Rapid City Planning Commission November 6, 2014 meeting. Some housekeeping items. If any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the agenda, there's a speaker request forms to the left of the dais. Please fill out the request form with the agenda number on of the item you wish to speak to and hand it to the secretary. Cell phones and electronic devices. At this time, we ask that any member of the audience that has a cell phone or other electronic device that you either turn it off or put the ringer on silent. If you need to take a call, please step out into the hallway so the meeting will not be disrupted. The consent calendar. Items 1 through 6 have been placed on the consent calendar and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken all consent items in accordance with staff recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by a planning commissioner, staff member, audience member for separate consideration at this time. The findings of the Planning Commission are recommendations to City Council. City Council will take the final decision and exceptions of the following items. Item 2, 14 PD 034. Item 5, 14 UR 020. The Planning Commission's actions on these items are final unless a party appeals the decision to the Rapid City Council. All appeals must be submitted in writing to the Planning Commission and Development Services Department by the close of business on the 7th full calendar day following action by the Planning Commission. Are there any items 1 through 6 that staff would like removed? Any items that planning commissioners would like removed? Are there any items an audience member? I have no requests for that.
Move to approve.
Second.
Steve made the motion, and John seconded the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passed. Item number 7.
Good morning.
Morning.
This item is an application to consider a project plan for tax increment district number 75. At the last Planning Commission meeting, you authorized staff to move forward with putting the project plan together and then creating the district. The property is located at between Myrtle and Maple Streets, just south of East St. Joe. And the applicant is proposing to demolish the structures, clear the land, and create some new additional housing units within this area. These are some of the photos from the existing structures. There are a couple of them in here that have been ordered to be demolished from our building inspection division, just based on the condition. They were currently used mostly for student housing for the School of Mines. With the previous submittal from with the TIF committee, the applicants had contacted our police and fire department for some information on service calls to this area, and you can see that there are several of them within this particular block. And here's a couple, here's a chart that identifies the numbers of calls from both the fire department and the police department, with not quite a 20% increase in citizen-initiated responses and a 2% increase in officer-initiated responses. Some more photos of the structures. And these are pictures within a 3-week time frame, and there are a couple of them in here that show quite a bit of vandalism, but then there are a couple of them that also show some more structural damage because both the police and fire department used them for some training exercises. But we do have a lot more vandalism with these structures, and that was just within a 3-week time frame. One of the criteria that we look at when we consider creating a district is whether it's a blighted area or not. And I believe this particular property does meet that criteria. This photo shows a picture of the alley, and one of the project Costs is to bury the power lines and then also pave this alley. Here's a picture of the view looking to the east and the two newest structures called Rocker Square and Rocker Square 2. So you can see the connection between this property and the School of Mines. Property looking to the north. Another, and here's a picture of the elevation of the proposed structure. It's going to be a 5-story structure. The first story is generally going to be used for services for the residents, and I'm not sure those services have been identified yet, but they will be similar to like maybe a coffee shop, a laundry room, those kinds of things. And then the top floor levels are going to be used for apartments. Here's the site layout, and this is the preliminary information provided to the Tax Review Committee. And this is the amortization schedule that we've used based on a 9% interest rate, with the property being assessed based on the construction value less the base value for the existing base when the district is created. And we estimate the taxes to generate at about $195,000. Of course, that could vary depending on the equalization's assessment, but we did visit with the assessment director, and he did indicate that this would be a good number to use. And so as we go through the review of the application, we look at what the applicant has provided. He has identified several things on the checklist, that it will encourage redevelopment, it will stimulate some economic development in the area, and it will increase some private investment. And then they're using they're going to use some of the costs for demolition, and one of the criteria is that it has to be approved by the council before they can include those costs, and that was done back in August. One of the things this graph here shows is the devaluation in the property. We looked at the data from 2008, and at that time, the current valuation for the property was about $760,000. At the end of 2013, which is our current year assessment, it had dropped to not quite $500,000. This is a chart that identifies the existing TIF districts that we have available within our community. One of the state requirements is that we can't go over 10% of the total valuation within the compilation of all of our TIFs, and today we're at not quite 4%. Let me throw up for you what the proposed costs are. So what you'll see here, part of the TIF will be allocated toward property acquisition, and in 2012 we did a similar TIF for the Rocker Square structures, and in that agreement it identified that there would be some $10,000 for costs for an appraisal, and we would recommend that that language be included in this particular agreement if this project moves forward. There's $100,000 for environmental cleanup and demolition, $100,000 for the alley reconstruction, which again includes burying the power lines and paving the alley, some engineering, some contingency, and some necessary and convenient costs, and then the financing. But with that, we do recommend approval with the one stipulation for the TIF to cover costs not to exceed $2.093 million. And if you have any questions, our applicant is in the audience. Or
Second.
Eric.
I need to abstain from this item due to a business relationship with the applicant.
As well.
John?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the two abstentions, Vicki, did the alternates vote? Brett's not here, but John will.
Correct.
And if I may, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Well, I haven't. I'm ready to vote. I think after we had our meeting last time, we went through this, that all the answers were provided, and the presentation is good. It'll be a great thing for the community. I intend to support the motion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Karen?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to disclose the fact that after last meeting, and my question to Hanny and Pat Hall was that I wanted to see a different performer, or at least look at that. And I did have a conversation with them with that intent in mind. It was a short conversation, and I directed them to give any further information to Patsy. So that's it, but I just wanted to disclose that. And I am supportive of the motion also.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passed. Item number 8.
Thank you. Item number 8 is 14 PD 035, an initial and final plan development overlay to allow multifamily housing with reduced front yard setback on approximately 1.07 acres of land located northwest of the corner or the intersection of Federal Avenue and West Rapid Street. Property is currently zoned medium density residential district. The applicant is proposing a total of 24 units located in 2 structures on the properties. In order to accommodate the required off-street parking and the buildings, the applicant has requested a reduction in the setback from 25 feet to 20 feet. Let me take you through some slides. Zoning map of the properties, you can see it's medium density residential district with a medium density to the east, north, and general commercial district to the south, west, and north. Aerial view of the property. The property is actually 4 lots today. The applicant has indicated they intend to consolidate the 4 lots into one in order to accommodate the multifamily housing. We have noted in the staff report that they do need to consolidate those lots before they could pursue building permit. Vicinity map again. There's a layout of the property, 2 structures, each with 12 apartment units, 3 stories in each structure, with the interior parking accessed from one point off of Federal Avenue. The requested reduction in setback was to allow the buildings to fit on the property as well as the parking off-street. So you do not have parking or tenants that are backing into the right-of-way in order to access and utilize their parking. Look at the elevations for the buildings. Picture of the site with the signpost at the corner. Look up West Rapid Street towards the north and west. Look down West Rapid Street to the south and east. Federal Avenue looking north. And then Federal Avenue from the top of the north sides of the property looking to the south. Also West Rapid Street from the north side of the property looking south. This is a look at the property from West Rapid Street. This would actually be the west end of the property, and then one more view of the kind of the east or lower end of the property. All of the requirements for landscaping and parking are being met at this time. Based on the design of the site and the topographical constraints that you saw in the pictures, the need to accommodate the off-street parking. Staff does recommend to support the reduction in the setback from 25 feet to 20 feet. Staff recommends to approve the initial and final plan development with the stipulations outlined in the staff report. If you have any questions, we're available for answers at this time.
Karen?
Thank you. I just have one question of the fire department, actually, if that's okay. In the staff report, it mentioned something about the retaining wall, and you had some concerns about getting in there. Is that a huge concern? Can you work around it? Could you explain that?
Thank you, Karen. No, it's not a big concern at all. I just simply noted in there that we weren't sure what the final configuration is going to be, and it really reflects where a fire hydrant may be located and that type of thing. The buildings will be fully fire sprinkler protected, and so really it's just a minor access issue that we can work around. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Move to approve. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 9.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item number 9 is a planned unit development zoning district. And the reason this is on non-consent is to introduce this application to you. It's our first one since we amended our ordinance back in 2012, whereby we are actually creating a unique zoning district. And this is a tool that was implemented. There are some uses that are requested of Rapid City that are not otherwise allowed in the zoning ordinance. In this particular property, Cummins, a company that primarily provides maintenance for recreational vehicles, is wanting to purchase property north of the Visitor Center and provide recreational vehicle maintenance, vehicle repair, which is permitted in both light industrial and general commercial. But as a part of that, they would also like to have some recreational vehicle sites for a very limited period of time for those who bring their vehicles in to be repaired. They might be waiting on a part to come in, or again, just staying there overnight as the vehicle's getting fixed. So with that, they brought in a planned unit development zoning district that would outline and create the uses, the bulk standards, the structural design standards, et cetera. And it will be a zoning document that actually gets recorded at Register of Deeds. And I'll just quickly run through it with you. This is a 7.58 acre parcel of land. It is located, as I said, north of the Visitor Center, between Taggart and North Elkville Road. The two southern lots are currently zoned light industrial, and the northern lot is zoned general commercial. Again, a vicinity map of the area. You can see where the interstate right-of-way is and how close that is to the interstate. This is sheet 1 of the document, and it is, again, all of these sheets will be recorded at Register of Deeds. It's a title sheet with a vicinity map. The land use plan. Mr. Rob, do you have the pen for up here? Let's see if I can write on it anyway. Oh, I can. The land use plan would show that in this area there will be 15 recreational vehicle spaces and a pet exercise area. The building will be somewhere within this area. There will be additional paved parking here. You may note that this northern lot is just identified for any use that would be permitted as light industrial or general commercial. It's not yet been identified, and that's permitted. You could do that. It's a nice fit to bring it into the project today, but yet allow it to be determined at a later date. This then goes to the land plan, and it addresses such things as parking, signage, some of the landscape requirements. So it's a pretty extensive tool, and we do want to thank Renner and Associates for being the first ones in Rapid City to tackle this. We will be using this as a sample for others to use. These work well on large parcels and small parcels. Our land use schedule as to when it would be coming in, some of the public improvements that are there, and private improvements that would be service lines to service it. These are our design standards that address screening, fencing, some of the RV utilities. There will not be a dump station that's required. They could have one if they had to do maintenance on a disposal system and needed to have that service. In this particular instance, because it's just overnight and it's not for long-term camping, if they were to come in with a full travel park, which is identified by ordinance with specific criteria, they would have to have an office, bathing facilities, a dumping station, et cetera, and that's a little extreme for what they want to do. Again, just some slides of the property itself. As you can see, it's undeveloped at this time. This would be looking north on Taggart, or excuse me, south. This would be looking north. You can see some of the other industrial buildings in the area. Looking south on Elkville Road and looking north on Elkville Road. And again, that's the interstate in the background. So we're excited that this is our first one. We see some larger projects. We have a large campus here in town that has some unique uses. We're hoping that someday they'll come in with a master plan that we can address similarly. So with that, we are recommending that this be approved. This document will be recorded. Anyone that purchases this property in the future will have these standards set forth for them to design to.
Motion to approve?
Motion's been made and second to approve item number 9. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Item number 10, and I'm going to make a few comments for the audience. I know there's quite a few people that wish to speak to this item, and we are very excited to have you speak because that's important for our information. But each person is limited to 3 minutes, and you'll have a 10-second warning, and at 3 minutes I will become rude and cut you off immediately. And we hope that each person will speak on different issues, because if we've heard it already, we do listen very intently. And so thank you for following this and going along with our rules for this speaking. Yeah, the green light is the speaking time. The yellow light is the 10-second warning. The red is when I say you're done. So, okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Dennis.
I would like to recuse myself from this discussion as I'm a member of the hospital board.
Thank you. Item number 10.
Madam Chair, item 10 is a major amendment to a plan development to allow a group home for transitional housing at 301 Fox Run Drive. And with that, I'd like to show you some slides. In 1993, a plan development was approved for this site to allow an assisted living facility with 30 rooms. In 2009, a major amendment was brought forward to allow for a medical equipment sales and rentals out of this building. And now today, we have this major amendment to bring the use back, utilizing the existing rooms with bathrooms that currently are located within the interior of the facility. As you can see from the aerial, we've got the VA building to the north. We've got 5th Street, which is an arterial street, to the east, and then beyond that are the apartments. This property is West Hills Village Senior Center. We've had several amendments to that over the years. The property directly to the west are townhomes. The property to the south is owned by the city and is a large drainage lot. We then again have additional drainage within this area, and then there are additional townhomes located on that property. Vicinity map of showing the location. The property is currently zoned office commercial, and as I noted, it is within a plan development. A group home is a conditional use within the plan development, and hence requires the public notification that we have here before us today. This is a floor plan of the building, and it shows that portion of the building, in particular, this portion, will actually be utilized for the group home at this time. And this portion will not be used. Any additional use within that area would require a major amendment to the plan development before they could expand within that area. One of the things that we looked at as a part of this is indoor and outdoor uses. There's a children's area here interior, and there's a children play area here to the exterior, and we'll go into that in a little more detail just shortly. This is the bottom level of the building, and it's just for accessory uses. There'd be no housing in that area. The little red marks on there show that the existing lighting that's there would be maintained. There would be no additional lighting on the property. A slide showing the building as it is today, and you can see the sign has been posted on the property as required. The parking lot is to the west of the building, between it and the residential townhomes just across that lot line. This shows the lot line, in particular right through there, that separates this use from the closest residential use to it. There's currently a fence. They are proposing to replace that with a 6-foot opaque fence to provide additional separation and additional screening. As you can see, there is vegetation as well. This is the location of the dumpsters. With that screening, they will also be screening in the dumpster location. Looking to the south and the west, you can start to see that natural drainage feature that circles this property in portions of the west and to the south. Looking west on Fox Run Drive. Looking north across the street, that is the VA building. Looking east, there are the apartments, and you can see 5th Street separates this property from the apartments. Looking north on 5th Street, and you can see the VA building, and there's a bank and further additional commercial uses along that side of the street. This is from Texas Street looking west, and what we were trying to demonstrate with this photo is the existing vegetation that is here that does serve as a physical as well as a visual separation from the building, the one that we're discussing today, and the residential development that would be within this area. Looking south on 5th Street, this would be the east side of the building. This is the area of the exterior that would be screened in for the children to play, and the only entrance to that would be from the inside of the building, so there would be control as to the children being able to get elsewhere on the property. And looking a little more closely at that screening at the southeast corner of the property. This is an application that's been brought forward by the Cornerstone Rescue Mission. They are proposing a group home that would allow for that transitional housing for women and children. Currently, the proposal is requesting for 9 bedrooms. 8 of them would be women with children, and the 9th one would be for a female veteran. I'd like to just very quickly go over the applicant's statement as to the intent behind this group home, that it would provide safe, supervised living accommodations, community support, and an opportunity for long-term success for low-income homeless women and their children. The goal is to reduce the incidence of homelessness by providing eligible women with transitional housing assistance, leading to permanent supportive housing and independent living. They also go on to say that there would be an individualized assessment developing family goal plans, identifying short and long-term objectives, and establishing timelines for overcoming barriers to self-sufficiency. There would be job search guidelines, life skill classes, parenting, nutrition, financial management and budgeting, health care, and transportation to job interviews and medical care. The average occupancy would be from 2 to 3 months. Their operational plan identifies, as I previously said, 9 bedrooms, 8 for women with children, 1 for a female veteran. The maximum occupancy would be 36. They are screened at the downtown office, and as a part of that screening, it needs to show that they're willing and able to work, and that they have sufficient motivation to come forward and to utilize this program to their advantage. There is continuous on-site supervision, 24 hours a day. There is a 9 o'clock curfew for all of the residents. As a part of that supervision, there's a full-time staff member at all times. Then from 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday, there's a case manager to go over all those goals that we just discussed. There's also a volunteer available in the evening to answer phones. And then once or twice a week, there's a couple more volunteers that come in for Bible study. We went over what the case management services would include to help improve that lifestyle so that they can go out and become self-sufficient. There is a daycare that's provided at for this facility. Those children that are of school age will be bused or driven to the appropriate schools. The rest will be taken to a daycare over off of Wisconsin Avenue. We talked about the indoor and the outdoor play area. That was very important to us. As we looked at this, one of our concerns was, is this the right location? We wanted to ensure that if you're going to have a facility with children up against an arterial street, that those children would be supervised and that they would be in a controlled environment when they wanted to play outside. By using the existing building and screening off that void where the entrance and exit to that play area would come from internal of the building, it really does provide that security that we were looking for. Again, we talked about the fence that's going to be between this and the property to the west, where we have our closest townhome development. There would be no change to the lighting, and currently there's no signage being proposed as a part of this. The existing building also does meet all building and fire codes, and it is already established for this type of use. We appreciate that whenever we have an item like this coming into an area of our community, it's certainly going to require the involvement of that neighborhood to ensure that we as staff is bringing forward to you the review of all of the circumstances and impacts that might be felt from this, to ensure that if we're going to offer you stipulations, we've not missed something. I'd like to thank all of you who live in this area who've taken the time to voice support and opposition to this, to bring forward the concerns and to bring forward those aspects of improvement that certainly need to be addressed as a part of what we're discussing today. This has been a tough one. As we look at where this use should be, it's a home. So we obviously think it should be in a residential development. But when we see these pitted directly onto a residential lot, there isn't sufficient parking. It is crowded around on all sides by residential, and that has caused issues in the past. When we look at whether or not it should be commercial, then we see, is that appropriate for the family atmosphere that we're trying to invoke so that we can see these people go forward and improve their life? This seems to be a marriage of both of those. As you saw along 5th Street, there is a commercial corridor. As you see to the west, it transitions into residential. We have separation provided by the drainage to the south. We have separation provided by the parking lot with the additional screening to the west. And of course, we've got 5th Street that provides clear separation to the properties to the east. And it is a nice marriage with those other commercial uses that are further to the north along 5th Street. As we look at a planned unit development, our ordinance sets forth specific criteria that you must review in order to make your decision. We reviewed that as a part of the staff report, and I'd like to just go over a few of those highlights. The first one we just talked about, which is the character of the neighborhood. Again, it's difficult trying to find that location where it fits, where it's not just in one or the other. This does seem to be a good compromise. They are providing the screening. There is a requirement that there be some natural features, and again, our drainage area that comes to the south and along the east portion of the eastern section of the property does create that natural buffer. Parking must be provided. They have sufficient parking. 13 spaces are required. 16 are being provided. That is not an issue. There's sidewalks in the area so that if ever there was a want for any of them to want to take their families on a stroll in the evening, they could do so. Because there is limited vehicles that would be coming onto the site with the residents, it would primarily be the workers, and because access is limited exclusively from Fox Run Drive, will be little impact to the existing traffic that's there today. Signage and lighting does not change. Public utilities are already there and in place for the building. It's a plus that it currently meets all of the building and fire code. We look at whether or not it meets our comprehensive plan that we've adopted as a part of where we want to see Rapid City grow. This particular property is identified as urban neighborhood. This use is allowed as a conditional use in that zoning designation. So we're going through the procedure that would be needed in order to bring that use to this property. We also have a city's consolidated plan that has identified that addressing the needs of homelessness for women and children is a high priority for Rapid City. Bringing this use to a site where we have that mix of commercial and residential, where hopefully we can secure the operation of it so that it has minimal impact on that neighborhood, would be addressing that specific need. That brings us then to the stipulations that have been outlined in the staff report, and if we could just quickly go through them. It does identify the parking that's required. It does limit the lighting, that there would be any more intrusions into the neighborhood. Any signage that would come forward in the future would have to meet sign code regulations. I would like to point out that stipulation number 5 does say 12 parking spaces required. If we could correct that to read 13, that would be fantastic. It needs to continually meet all of the international fire code and building code requirements. Most importantly, it limits the use of this property to the applicant's operational plan. I think they did a really good job trying to show that it could fit in this neighborhood with the supervision and the limitations as to the number of residents. We've also stipulated in stipulation number 11 that at no time can this function as a mission, a detox center, or a detention center. We've also introduced a unique stipulation, number 12, that says, you know, we need to go back and look at this item in 6 months. If this is to function according to that plan, and we see that it is not causing any adverse impacts on the neighborhood, then in 6 months, we can bring this back before the Planning Commission, and it may be your decision at that time to go ahead and approve it on a more permanent basis. But for now, we would like to bring forward a recommendation that you approve this with a review period built in, that at your May 7th, 2015 Planning Commission meeting, we bring this item back forward. We will notice the neighborhood again. A sign would be posted again, and we will have that opportunity for anyone to step forward who feels that it did not operate according to that plan. So one of the other items that was linked that I want to bring to your attention, that there is an incident report for the facility where they're currently located at 404 Columbus Street. As a result of that, we did ask the Chief of Police, Chief Jegaris, to look at that report and give us a summary of what all that meant, because it was a very long report. Attached to your item on the agenda is an incident summary. It does show that over the last 3 years, the number of incidents at this site have reduced. Part of the concern is that at 404 Columbus Street, you're in closer to the downtown core. There's a lot of pedestrian activity throughout the evening hours, and it's closer to the existing mission. By locating it in an area where it is significantly separated, under strict supervision, certainly there is some indication that that too will be addressed as a part of the location. I will let the chief speak to that if you have questions for him. Lastly, Carla Cushman with our attorney's office did send out an email 2 days ago that advised the Planning Commission that when we're looking at something that does involve so much community input, we need to be sure that as we're looking at the criteria and we're voting either for or against, that we're specific to the reasons why we're supporting it, or we're specific to the reasons why we're denying it. And they must be real reasons. So I will let her further explain that when you get to the point where you want to make your motion, so that we stay within the ordinance and what we're allowed to do. We are recommending to approve with the 12 stipulations as outlined. You have a lot of people here to speak to it today, and we're here to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions?
The question that was asked is if that incident summary that I referenced in my presentation that was linked online, and it is available online for everyone to view. There we go. Oh, it's area, okay. Perhaps I could have you explain that.
Hi, I'm Carl Jagaris. I'm the Chief of Police. The graph that you see there, that is for the current women's shelter area of 404 Columbus Street. And basically, that's the neighborhood. It's about a 6-block area that is going to be to the east of 5th Street in that location. So you can see the total calls for service and the call types in the downtown area. And then there's 23 pages linked of all the calls for service that have occurred specifically at the address at the current women's shelter, and that's from 2008 to present. As you can see, there is a total of, if you look at the last page on page 23, there's a total of 213 calls for service, and some simple math will tell you that that's an average of about 35 calls for service per year and 1 call every 11 days. Going through the call types, I can tell you that these types of calls are where we're there to serve the people within the residence, the women and children. There's clearly a direct correlation between poverty and a higher need for police services. That's a citywide and a nationwide just social condition. So we're used to serving that population to a high degree. And there's a lot of social reasons for that. There's more victimization, and when we're dealing with women and children that are homeless, that just elevates even more. Going through all the calls, there was one that was of concern with me in 2011, and that was reported as a rape, and it had an arrest. So I pulled that full report and reviewed it and learned that the rape occurred at a different location in our community. It was reported at that address, and then the arrest also occurred at a different location in the community. So I would suggest that there is a higher need for police services in this type of a facility, but it doesn't have a direct correlation to the surrounding area. It's likely that these calls for services would be diverted to the new location, which it's likely that you could suggest that a police response would be at that location about once every 11 days, which there are many addresses in our community that have our presence there much more. And I'll stand by for any questions.
Andy?
That was, Madam Chair, that was just suggesting that maybe we hear from the audience before. I'd like to reserve asking questions till after we hear from the audience and those that wish to speak.
Madam Chair, did you want to call them up? I believe you have the speaker request forms.
Jim Castleberry?
This one works? Okay, great. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission.
Please identify yourself.
I'm sorry, I'm Jim Castleberry, Executive Director of Cornerstone Rescue Mission. The one that was a big part of bringing this before you today. I've been with Cornerstone going on 12 years. I was part of the planning process for the initial Women and Children's Home, which has been at 404 Columbus since 2005. And we've seen a lot of change. A couple points that I think are important that haven't been covered. One is that these are citizens of your community, our community. And we're looking for an opportunity to simply create a better living condition for them and their children. And this location on Fox Run Drive and 5th is a dream come true. After 3 years, with the help of the board and staff, we've looked high and low. We've made offers on properties. We've been outbid. this was the right place at the right time. The fact that it meets code requirements, that it already had the bedrooms in existence, that it has a a kitchen facility for us to use. Those are just wonderful attributes. We'll have well over $1 million invested in this project. So it's not a flop house. It's not a place to just hang and get into trouble. For those of us that know us, we run a pretty tight operation. We have a lot of rules. We also have a lot of love and compassion for the people we help. And we certainly would ask that the Planning Commission approve this based on the fact that it meets all of the criteria within the ordinance and it's an appropriate use of that space. My understanding is the community objected when the hospital wanted to change it from the transitional living, assisted living facility to a medical supply company. That's their right. I understand that. This is a better use, in my opinion. I mean, those rooms are sitting empty, not being used. Let's put them to use. We operate because the community wants us here. We do well because the community supports us, both financially and in services. So everything we do today is a representation of this community. And having lived here for 15 years, I'm proud to say that we do it right. And I just encourage the commissioners to ask me any questions if they have any at this time.
Thank you. Gary Gross.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I'll be very brief. I live on Fox Run Drive, up 2 or 3 blocks from the proposed site. And in thinking about this for the past several weeks since it was noticed in the newspaper, I thought that how nice, how compassionate, what a good thing and a need this is for those less fortunate than ourselves. It is a need in the community. I know if I had a family member or a friend that was in need of some type of facility like this that is safe, clean, in a nice area, that I would be very grateful that there is a place like this for these people to go. So I'm just asking you to vote for this, to allow this, and to have compassion on those less fortunate than us. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Jody Brown.
Hi, my name is Jody Brown, and I'm a current resident of the Women and Children's Home. And I guess I'm here today to speak on behalf of the women and the children there. We currently have 22 women, 15 children, and we range in the age of 56 years old and 6 days old. Our home right now currently has 9 bedrooms. We have some handicapped people in our home. It is not a very accessible home for us. I am too handicapped. There are 18 stairs that go up and down from our main bedrooms to the kitchen area and what have you. It's very hard. I know we need more of that. I know for the women and children and that many people in that old of a home that's very small, the kitchen service is so small. We don't have room for all of us. And, you know, we don't just lay around all day. We have things that we do. We have mission service. We either pay for our beds or we work for our beds. And we're asking the community for a hand up, not a handout. And I guess for all of us there, I'm going to say, thank God. Thank God we have some place to go. Because if we didn't, what would become of us? We are just like you. You know, we just have troubles, and I just want to say thank you for hearing me, and please, We really need this facility. We have water damage right now in our home that is coming from upstairs, downstairs. Our one whole wall is bubbled out. It's kind of getting decrepit. It's old, and we take care of it. We clean that house every day. We all have chores. We all have things that we're obligated to do, you know, and it's hard. It really is. And there's other things that they offer us also there at the home. They offer us life classes. They offer us Bible study. You know, they offer us a lot of things that, to be honest, out there on your own, when you're down and out, you don't have. You don't have somebody there to help you or guide you. Some of these women, you know, they're young. They're children. And they got children of their own. They haven't been taught these skills. They don't know. And that's some of the things that the women do for us there, is they help us and they guide us and they show us the things that we don't know or we don't know how to do. And I want to applaud them for that, because thank you. So I guess there's probably more I could say, but I'm not sure what else to say. I'm nervous. So thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Jody. Alan Barrett. Alan?
Good morning to you all. My name is Alan Barrett. I'm a Vice President of Rapid City Regional Hospital. We are here to basically support the mission, the values of what the rescue mission is all about in our community. We like to believe that ourselves, the Rapid City Regional Hospital, is one that serves our community in its complete needs for healthcare services and everything that goes with that. I want to say it's been a pleasure working with Jim Castleberry and his staff and his group in regard to this project, because it has meaning to us as well as it has meaning to our community. So we hope you can support this project, and that it has these are people that are all part of us and all part of what we're here to do. And it may be a difficult situation, but it's one that we can serve in a much better way than we're currently serving it. Their current facilities really do not meet the needs, as you heard expressed by one of the individuals using it. We believe that in conjunction with the mission, they can improve this and make this a much better facility for it. But I just want you to know, though, that the mission has taken a lot of their time and effort, a lot of their, if you will, values they've placed into this thought and this issue. And it's never easy to place into any one of these. You know, as a member of our community, I can tell you that it's always a difficult decision. Where do you place these things in our community? So I understand the issues that the community itself may want to express and have concerns about, but I will tell you it seems like, at least in our dealings with them, between the mission and the hospital, it seems like they've taken great care in trying to address the issues that can serve the community, but as well serve the neighborhood as well. So, any questions or?
Thank you. Greg Barnier.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm a member of the board of the Cornerstone Mission, and I'm here to ask you to support what has been presented by your staff for this use. To very briefly respond, I think I'd like to go back to the comments that Chief Jagras made. The unfortunate fact of life as we know it is that lower income people sometimes are required more to rely on public services. In those statistics he gave you, what that translates into is sometimes, rather than having a family member to call on, they have to call emergency services, they have to call the police. That's not really their fault. That just shows that there's a need. This has been, as staff noted, this has been identified as a priority for the community, and I'd ask that you would move this forward and support it so that the facility can be located here. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Kurt Korkal.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Kurt Corco. I live at, myself and my family live at 365 Texas Street. We're across the street from the planned location. I don't have any affiliation with the Rapid City Regional Hospital. Myself and daughter do volunteer at the thrift store. We believe that a lot of us in the neighborhood, we know this is necessary. We believe this is the right building. We believe it's the right time. We think it may be the wrong place. And one of our main concerns does have, it's a concern of property values and safety. We think maybe we might want to look at that a little closer. I think anywhere it gets located, it probably deserves some evaluation. But getting down to maybe why this is also a wrong place, it's a very busy corridor, the 5th Street corridor, and we believe that's unsafe for this type of use. We also believe that the actual available land used for the children is very small. I believe it was listed between, I think, 1,100 and 1,200 square feet, that outside area, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, which is about, I believe, 3/100ths of an acre. I don't think you could probably get 5 kids in there, let 2 of them play catch, and not being one of the other ones in the head. It'd be pretty tough. We, pointing out those 2 situations, I would have to imagine that the vision for placing this would be to have maybe a nicer sized area. It's easy to probably bring up the challenges that this location presents. Probably tougher to come up with the solutions. One solution I thought, I mean, it's just been several years ago, I believe the governor's house, the mansion, was moved from Pierre all the way to Rapid City. There's also an opportunity, I would think, to locate this closer, for instance, to Robbinsdale Park. The city has very much land just to the north side of Fairmont Street, where they could partner with this and, I think, move the facility to just that part of the building. That would actually make that property much more marketable for what was intended, making a much better ratio of parking to what would be left there as a building, and it would serve a good use for a medical office, dental office, any type of office as what does exist in that corridor today. It's pretty tough to come up with solutions like this in a 3-minute time period, and that one might be far-fetched. They could even possibly partner. There's a piece of property, 3-acre piece of property right at Elm and Fairmont that's also owned by Rapid City Regional. That could be moved to that property. They could have the opportunity to put in a garden. They'd have a much better opportunity for play space. Robbinsdale Park provides BMX, soccer fields. It provides a beautiful park. They don't have the opportunity to put in a picnic area.
Sir, you need to stop. Thank you.
If there's any questions, please feel free.
Gary Cutler. Okay, thank you very much. Tamara Peer.
Good morning. I'm Tamara Peer, and I am a former board member for Working Against Violence, and currently I'm on the Cornerstone Rescue Mission Foundation Board. 404 Columbus was originally the women's shelter, and when the new shelter was built, that was transferred to, can you hear me okay? It was transferred to Cornerstone Rescue Mission, and at that time it was decrepit. And Wavy had constructed a new building. So I think that you'll find that there are increasing needs in this community for a safe shelter for these individuals, and that I certainly understand the need for balancing the needs of the neighborhood against those needs for these very vulnerable individuals. What you will find, I think, when you look at what the planning staff has done is a very good job of balancing all of those interests. And one where I think you can allow this in. Cornerstone Rescue Mission traditionally has always been very receptive and very good at working with neighborhoods. One other thing I wanted to bring up is that the nature of the neighborhood where the shelter is currently located is one where calls for service are not unusual, not only from resulting from the patrons of that environment, but because there's also a frat house in that neighborhood and others that cause a certain level of need for a call for service. And it is my understanding that the neighborhood, that the neighbors have never called in as a complaint regarding that facility. I'm not absolutely sure, but that is my understanding. In addition, I wanted to tell you that Greg Barnier, who just spoke, lives in the neighborhood that would be impacted by this. He's at 3960 City View Drive, and I certainly hope you will approve of this use. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Scott, and I'm sorry I can't read your last name. So,
good morning. My name is Scott Nash, and I'm one of the original developers of Fox Run. I can guarantee you 3 minutes isn't long enough to explain some of the issues there, but we'll give it a shot. When we envisioned this development, it was to get away from the core downtown and be out in the country somewhat. At that time we were. Fifth Street didn't go very far beyond us. And in the last 25 years, we've seen a lot of stuff come around. That area that is now being discussed was MDR property. And the area to the north across Fox Run was MDR property. That's the way we envisioned it. That's the way we zoned it. Since then, we've got 3 or 4 medical centers, we've got banks, we've got office buildings, assisted living. That piece of property was overbuilt from day one. There's not enough parking for the structure of the people that are there. There is a very big need for what we need to do there with these folks. And I don't have a problem with that, but if you want to put it in this facility, tear the other building down. Remove the other building, because I know it's going to get full and there's not enough parking now. We've had issues over the past 25 years with assisted living, people coming on Saturdays to visit, the street's blocked, you can't get to the intersection. We've had problems with the medical facility, pickups with horse trailers behind them parked blocking our intersection. It's a very busy intersection. If you notice, it doesn't line up with the intersection across the street for the apartment, so it makes it very difficult getting in and out of there. These are things that really haven't been addressed here, I don't think. 2 weeks ago, we started work on Fifth Street. Coincidentally, they put the traffic cones down to 1 lane right at City View, so everybody takes the exit down through Fox Run Drive. At one time, we had a 20 miles an hour speed limit because it's narrow streets. Now it's back up to 25. There's no enforcement of it. The covenants that we were required to put in at Fox Run Drive when it was developed was no on-street parking. And people have spent quite a bit of time and money to develop some off-street parking so they don't park on the street. We have signs all the way up and down that portion of Fox Run Drive, no parking, but it's ignored. And it's not enforced. You can have an ordinance, but if it's not enforced, it doesn't do any good. It looks to me like you have 8 residents and 3 or 4 staff. That's 12 or 13 parking spots. I think there's 12 there now. You've got an additional building that I know is going to get put to use. If you want to use this site, make a stipulation that that other building be removed. Thank you.
thank you. Questions? Karen?
I didn't realize we were done with all the speakers, I guess. I had initially some concerns over the calls for service, and I appreciate Chief Jaggeris discussing that. I think my question for him or for the staff would be, do you think, and this would be your opinion, do you think by moving the home from downtown area farther into a residential community, would that lessen the calls based on the fact that you're farther away from the shelter itself or from the mission itself?
I'd say that most or all of the calls that we have there are there to serve the residents for various reasons. And so I would say it would be very similar.
Okay, thank you, sir. Looking at it from a land use area and how that building would fit in with what the needs are out in the community, it appears to me that it's a very good location based on the fact that there's a large street going through it. There's residentials in the area. There's commercial property in the area. It just seems to me that it fits. I do understand the concerns of the neighborhood and also the letters from all the support, and I've read every one of them that have come through, and including the staff report, to find out what's the best answer for this community. I think that the fact that we have a 6-month trial period, I think is good. I think that will give the neighborhood an idea to say this really works or this really doesn't, and it will also give us on the Planning Commission that same opportunity to do that. I appreciate Scott's comments, and unfortunately that does happen a lot when we have areas that are residential and then it changes, and I live in an area that's similar to that, and it is hard when things change in your neighborhood. I personally, I feel that this is the correct location at this time. It would be nice if there was another place that, and I know the gentleman mentioned there's some other areas that could be looked at. If this does get expanded, and maybe that will be something in the future that will happen. But based on the fact that there's play areas for kids, that I know one of the concerns was that the street's too busy and kids can't play out there. The fact that at least will be closed off and there'll be a spot for kids to go outside is a plus. Might be small, but at least there's a spot out there for the kids to go. So at this point, I'm supportive of the idea and agree with the stipulations that have been made. So that's my comments for now. Thank you.
Janelle Fink, I have a request.
Good morning. My name is Janelle Fink. I'm with Fisk Land Surveying, and I'm working as the agent for Cornerstone, assisting them with their application. I did want to be real brief because I know we spent a lot of time talking about this, but I did want to touch on the parking issue just briefly. As a consultant, when I talked with Jim when we looked at this project, I was a little concerned, is there sufficient parking for the area as well? And based on the criteria that we have that requires only one parking space per unit, plus the employees, we actually meet that or exceed the parking. And then Jim also explained that most of these residents actually don't have vehicles. In the location they're in now on Columbus Street, there's probably not more than a couple off-street parking spaces, and it's again, we need a better facility, but you're not overloading your streets or the adjoining areas because a lot of these people don't have their own vehicles. That's why Cornerstone provides transportation to a lot of things. And this is an excellent location in terms of the corridor to serve these people. They have needs for public transportation. You have Rapid Ride, you have bus system that's nearby. They're close to their daycare, they're close to the hospital and medical facilities, they're close to employment opportunities, both on Mount Rushmore Road and further on down the corridor. So there are a lot of reasons that make this a good fit and a good location. And I appreciate Karen's comments and all of those that we've received, and I really would urge you to approve this per the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Jan?
Thank you. I only have a couple of questions for Chief Jagaris and hopefully some other staff member, probably the attorney's office. I'm only asking about, Chief, about the incidents that occurred that you have to make calls to, as in the one that turned out to be a rape at another location. How many of the calls there are due to the neighborhood that it's in as opposed to the direct needs of the residents? In other words, if they weren't in that neighborhood and they were in another neighborhood, you wouldn't expect to have fewer calls on the 400 block of Columbus Street, would you? Or many fewer?
No. Again, these are service calls where we're going to serve the residents, the women and children. You can see that a great number of them are reported or requested by the staff of the Cornerstone.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And for the attorney's office, I just wondered, or anyone who can answer this on the staff, I just wondered if there was any precedent for this type of item coming up and being approved by the commission in the city or denied by the commission in the city. I seem to remember there was a certain property on Quincy Street that was turned into a sort of drug rehabilitation center or some sort of alcohol testing center or substance abuse center that was objected to by the surrounding residents and was in a historic district, and yet it went through. Is that similar or create a precedent, or are there other precedents?
Vicki?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, the city had to go through a conditional use permit review for the current location at 404 Columbus. I think Tamara identified to her connection with Wavy and its location at Quincy. Those were brought forward, and some of you might remember them. There was a lot of neighborhood concern. This room was probably pretty full both times then also. The last thing I believe you indicated was the 24/7 program that was located closer to the courthouse and has since moved out onto Campbell Street. In all of those incidents, of course, the neighborhood, once they become aware of that use, do rightfully so get involved. We need that, and I think this is similar to what we've seen in past locations. The good news is because of those uses, we do have a history of how they can operate with the neighborhood, and we bring that forward in the stipulations that we suggest to you today.
Thank you.
Andy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have several questions for a few different people. First, maybe while I ask Jim Castleberry and Vicki a few questions. Chief Jagaris, I would be curious if you could tell us or think about this while I talk with them. How many of those calls are what I would call well calls, which are follow-ups due to victimization or just well visits versus some sort of criminal type activity? I think that's important in the count of 213 and once every 11 days. Jim Castleberry, is he available?
Yes, sir.
Jim, what's the time frame of which the guests are allowed to live within this shelter? Is it a limitation? Is it, no more than 10 days, no less than 10 days? And is there restrictions around their particular behavior which allows them to stay or be asked to leave?
Sure. Thanks for the question. We look at each individual case. Typically, it's about 2 months, maybe as much as 4. It's a completely different operation than 30 Main Street, the rescue mission, and the emergency shelter type of operation that we have there. Women are initially screened for their suitability of this program at 30 Main Street. Case manager goes over there, meets the woman and her child to make sure that there, isn't some particular issue that we think is going to be problematic. I mean, one of the real challenges for us, obviously, is when we do have 30-plus people in this old house and there is no room. So we've got to make sure that clients get along as best they can, that we don't have some severe mental illness problem, that we don't have some overt, incidents of substance abuse or something that's going on. They get tested on the front end. They get tested continually for those kinds of things. We've talked about curfew. We've talked about case management is a process where we guide people to help make decisions for themselves. And if we have someone that clearly just doesn't want to work the program, then they're given an out date. Now, we will work with other agencies and with family members, to find another place to send them. The goal is not to put them back on the street, but we only have so many resources and so much time, and we want to devote those to those where they can best be used. And I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, a quick follow-up question. How does your service compare to the services offered by Wavy?
Another good question. Wavy distinguishes itself primarily because these are people coming immediately out of situations of domestic violence. And so in concert with law enforcement, you know, this is the safe haven for them, and they're allowed to stay for approximately 30 days. Sometimes Wavy will call and say, do you have room for a family? We have, because we're at the 30-day limit, we have to have beds available because, as you know, those numbers don't seem to go down for us. And so it is. And so if that's an appropriate placement, we do take them, absolutely.
And then one last question. One of the residents had mentioned a count of like 56 people in the current home, and I don't know that made sense to me. So in the count of 32 or 36 is what is allowable within the space. Is there a limitation to maybe that's 10 moms with 2 kids each, or is that a factor that needs to be put into place?
Unfortunately, it's driven to a large extent by the rooms. We have one room that's dedicated to veteran women and their families. The VA pays for that. It's sort of like the jail gets a subsidy from the Marshal Service to keep X number of beds available. And it's usually full. Sometimes we have 2 veterans in there. The other rooms, if there's a family in there, you know, that's the family that's going to be in there. Now, we might, on occasion, put some single women together in a room, but we've only got 9 rooms, and so there's only so many beds. We're not going to sleep them on the floor. We have to do that at the Mission, unfortunately, but we don't do that at the Women and Children's Home.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, could I ask staff a few questions as well? Vicki, would you mind a little bit of your time?
Absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you. What is the reasoning, maybe that's not the right word. My question is about the trial period. Is that something that staff is recommending, or is that an option that which Mr. Castleberry of the hospital brought to staff as an option?
That's a recommendation that staff is bringing forward. We looked at this operational plan, and they do say in the plan that there will be 9 rooms and that there will be a maximum of 36 residents on the site. When we look at the play area, which was noted by someone from the neighborhood, when we look at the parking, not knowing if they're going to have cars or not, we want to ensure that that is being abided by. So this could be a very good location, but there needs to be some consensus that the operational plan as proposed is abided by, and we, if given the opportunity to come back in 6 months to review that operational plan to see where it might be too strict and where we might need to tighten it up a little bit so that we don't have that adverse impact on the traffic and access that Scott Nash identified. Those are the kinds of things. So we did definitely look at all of that as a part of our recommendation.
And the applicant is okay with that stipulation?
I would guess they prefer it not be there, but in order for us to bring forward a solid recommendation to approve, we certainly wanted the opportunity to come back and look at it.
Okay. On the floor plan, it appears that there's some, it calls no use designation for this application. Mm-hmm. What is that? Is that area of the building that's not being utilized? And this kind of wraps into the parking question. It appears there's a lot more building there than what's being used. So I think Mr. Nash brings up a good point there. What if this is the right location, and what if the needs of the facility grow? Or is this an area that Regional Health will choose to mothball, or what if they want to put in another business? I think that needs to be addressed.
It is in stipulation number 11, and it says any use within this area. Right now they're identifying it as a no-use area. There are, I believe, 9 more bedrooms in that area. They are using bunk beds in the area, I believe, that has been identified for use. any expansion into this additional area would require a major amendment. We'll be back before you. The neighborhood would be noticed again. And I believe this is the part of the building that Scott Nash indicated he'd like to see removed, concerned that there would be something there. I don't know the financial abilities to do that. That's something I guess you could visit with Mr. Castleberry about. But for now, again, noting that if it is used according to the plan and the floor plan that's submitted, in 6 months we come back, it should be a telltale sign if there's additional use on the property and parking and traffic become issues, or if there are more children there than can fit into the play area, et cetera. Something that we'd like to have this discussion with and allow the neighborhood to be able to come back and speak to it as well.
And the parking being supplied is really just for the area that's being utilized. It does not encompass parking for the unused area of the building?
There's no parking requirement for the unused area.
Okay. And then I promise this will be my last, well, maybe I have 2 more questions.
You said one.
Be very objective is what I'm trying to do. And lost my train of thought here. How does the technical use of a group home compare to the technical description of assisted living? I mean, from a planning and zoning or an ordinance standpoint, fundamentally, is there any difference? Or is it just more of a social word that we use differentiating a group home from an assisted living home?
Assisted living is something that's more permanent. This is something that's usually for elderly or maybe those that are handicapped that they need that assistance. They're not there learning tools so they can leave there typically and go out and live on their own. A group home is someone that's needing assistance now, and it's also offering things such as counseling, job skill training, et cetera, so that it is transitional in nature and they can go out and live independently. Assisted living in our community is typically associated with seniors. Group homes, for the most part, have no age limit on it.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, or this would be more of a statement, is that I noticed on the site plan that, assuming that somebody brings forth a motion here, that I see the fence stops about at the dumpsters rather than continuing to the south property line. And if a motion is made here by somebody to approve this, I would suggest a stipulation is made to extend that fence all the way down along that property line.
Madam Chair, if I might, one of the concerns there is when you get past that parking lot, it drops off and there's floodplain. I don't think we can put a fence in that drainage area. We tried to capture that with the slides that we showed, showing that the terrain itself does provide a visual buffer. It does drop significantly off, and because of the floodplain issues, there might be some engineering concerns.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm just going to comment that is true. It does drop drastically. I live in that area, so I drive by it every day. So it does drop just like that. Steve?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andy had actually asked some of the questions I was concerned about too, but I've got another one too, and it concerns the calls for service. It's been said quite a few times now that calls for service are because of the residents there making that call. And I was wondering if you could give us examples of what calls are. And if you're going there every 11 days, I'm assuming they're pretty similar.
Primarily us providing social service support to this at-risk population. Several runaway reports, child welfare concerns, disturbances that are resolved without arrest. There are some nonviolent crime type reports like theft. There's a few intoxicated subject calls, transports to detox. I think that, you know, this at-risk population, there's going to be a higher propensity of drug or alcohol use, and there are a couple of assault reports. I can't say that they occurred at that location. I think primarily those would be reported from another location. There's a lot of non-emergency things like in that count, like a parking complaint. In that 6-year period, it looks like there's about 1 arrest per year, which I would suggest is a very low arrest rate for for a location like that. And it looks like at least a couple of those are what's called a pickup in place, where a probation officer might know where the woman is living and they've got a condition of their probation that they hadn't followed, so we go and we pick them up and bring them in. So again, and that's part of being caught in that cycle of extreme poverty as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I continue?
Yes.
To me, this is a really, really difficult issue. I got several concerns with it, but at the same time, I like the location. When it comes to the location, it has some of the similar concerns. You've got another building there, and I think parking for what you have currently is acceptable. I'm worried about the other building, and you know, if something ever goes in there, I like the fact that it does come back before us, because I couldn't approve anything in there unless they do something, either create more parking, do something with the building. But as it stands, I'm okay with the parking. I understand that probably a lot of them won't have cars. They're living there, and that's why I asked too, again, about the follow-up calls. I'm assuming you have 8 or 9 families living together with 3 or 4 kids or whatever, and every family has issues just with one family, and that many together is going to be some calls. I just want to make sure it wasn't, you know, violence and, you know, drugs and stuff like that. And I do understand the neighborhood's concerns too. Anytime you're going to put something like this, you're always wondering, how's this going to affect us? And so I appreciate the staff coming forward with the 6 months, because I really like that idea that we can check it out, and all the concerns the neighborhood has, at that point in time, we will know. My biggest concern, though, is all the bodies sitting up here, none of us are elected officials, and I really think this belongs in front of the council. And I noted that our decision is final unless appealed to the council. And again, personally, I believe this should be heard by the council, because they are elected officials and this is a social issue. But having said that, the way it sits in the way that the staff has taken care of all the concerns, it's a tough issue, but I'm leaning towards at least the 6 months probationary period. Thank you.
Move to approve.
Oh, I have some more speaker requests. Eric?
Andy asked the question that I had about no use as well. Thanks.
Okay. Karen?
Thank you. I again wanted to speak because I appreciate all the comments that have been made up here on the staff and the Planning Commission members. That does help, you know, to some degree in my final decision. I have the two concerns that I have are with the additional building and what's going to happen with that. Basically, if the need is there, which it could be, and they expand and then there's not enough parking and it's too tight, that does concern me to some degree, and especially the calls for service, that does concern me also, to disrupt the neighborhood. You know, that's not quite fair to the neighbors if it becomes a problem. My question is probably with the attorney's office. If we go forward and approve this with the stipulations that are noted, and in 6 months we look at this and say the calls for service are just too disruptive to the neighborhood, or if they want to expand at some future time and we say no, they can't do that, does that follow an attorney's reason for us to say no, and they have to remove themselves and find another location?
Thank you, Karen. Your concern is valid, but I'm comfortable with the time frame that's proposed in the staff report. I think the applicant is aware that any approval is contingent upon that 6-month review. I think at that time, if you choose to make a different decision, I'm comfortable with I would be comfortable with that situation from a legal perspective.
Okay, and one further question. Is the calls for service and the disruption of the neighborhood, is that a valid reason to deny something like this as a land use issue?
I guess that would be up to the commission. I think under the criteria within the conditional use permit ordinance, under the criteria or considerations that the Planning Commission is to consider. I think if it were to be a situation where there were a large amount of calls for service that was disrupting the neighborhood, like you had discussed, I think that would be an appropriate basis on which to make your decision.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And at the time when the mission first came in, several years ago, I had a business downtown very close to that mission at the time. And I can appreciate the neighborhood coming out and being nervous about something like that happening because I was in that same position as you were and spoke against it before the city council at that time. But it turned out my fears were not as great as I thought they were, and I'm hoping that that is the same for the neighborhood. And at this time, I'm still supporting it. Thank you.
Amanda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I ask Chief Jagras a couple questions, please?
Certainly.
Hi, Chief.
Hi.
Just a couple clarifying questions that were posed from Planning Commission members that were up here are already addressed the questions. One of them is when Karen recently asked the city attorneys about disruptive conditions to the neighborhood. On these calls of services, are they lights ablazing, horns blazing, and you're running, the police cars coming in full force into these calls of services?
No, these are not red hot calls for service. These are responding to provide service again, primarily. So there was one structure fire listed in there in one of the years, but primarily these are a routine patrol response. The impact to the general neighborhood is that they'll see patrol cars in the parking lot on a more frequent basis. Approximately once every 10 to 12 days is a good prediction.
And so since there's no lights and sirens and everything else going off, would there typically be more than one patrol vehicle responding for a call of service?
There might, depending on the nature of the call. It's very common for us to send a backup officer if there's a disturbance or anything like that. So there certainly could be two.
Is it possible that the police cars themselves would be causing the traffic to be backed up?
I don't think so. I think, the police presence in the neighborhood shouldn't provide any sense of fear for the neighborhood.
Sorry, let me clarify. If two patrol cars showed up, would they be blocking the access in the street?
We would likely park in an available parking space. If there wasn't one available, then we would park in the street and have our orange flashers activated.
All right. And typically for a call of service, if you do have to park on the street, how long would the police car be taking up the on-street parking spot with flashing lights?
I would say it would range anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
And then just to comment on that, because I know I'm up in Ward 4 and I represent Ward 4 on the City Council, but I will tell you, a lot of my neighbors up in Ward 4 live on streets that are not thoroughfares. And one of the biggest questions I get asked when I am visiting with my constituents is, I would like to see a police car come through our neighborhood more often because that police presence actually deters criminals from coming into our area. So I would just like to let you know, Chief, anytime you want to go through the streets of Ward 4, you're welcome up there with your police cars. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Any other comments? Motion's been made and seconded to approve. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate the input. I think it helps all of us in moving forward. Thank you very much for giving us your time. Any other items for us today, Vicki? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. Well, to be perfectly honest, only 2 people spoke.